Welcome to Laura's English Vibe.
Why you can't speak English. The silent problem. Every English learner remembers a moment like this. It doesn't happen in a classroom. It doesn't happen during an exam. It happens in real life. Someone smiles at you. They ask a simple question. For a second, everything feels normal. Then something changes. Your mind becomes strangely quiet. The answer is there. You know it. You can almost feel it. But somehow, the words never arrive. Your heart beats a little faster. You smile to hide the silence. Your thoughts begin to race. Should I use the present tense? Is this the right word? Did I pronounce that correctly? Maybe I should say it another way. The longer you think, the harder speaking becomes. A few seconds later, the conversation moves on, but one question stays with you. What happened? If you've experienced that moment, you're not alone. Millions of English learners experience exactly the same thing, almost every day. Many people believe the answer is simple. I need more vocabulary. Others believe, my grammar isn't good enough. Some blame their pronunciation. Some blame their accent. Some even believe they're simply not talented enough to learn another language. Those explanations sound reasonable, but they all have one problem. They focus on what happens after the silence, not what caused it. Because the silence begins long before you search for words. It begins inside your mind. Long before your mouth opens, your brain has already started making decisions. Some of those decisions happen so quickly that you never notice them. Your brain asks questions like these. Is this safe? What if I make a mistake? What if they don't understand me? What if I sound foolish? None of those questions are about English. They're about protection. Your brain is trying to protect you from uncertainty. That isn't a weakness. It's something every human brain does. Imagine standing at the edge of a swimming pool. You know how to swim. You've practiced many times. But the water feels colder than expected. For just a moment, your body hesitates. Not because you've forgotten how to swim, because your brain wants to make sure everything is safe. Speaking another language often feels the same. The hesitation isn't always caused by a lack of knowledge. Sometimes it's caused by a lack of certainty. And certainty is something language can never fully give you. Every conversation is different. Every person speaks differently. Every situation is new. That means your brain can never predict everything. For some people, that feels exciting. For others, it feels uncomfortable. Most learners respond in exactly the same way. They decide they need to prepare more. Another grammar book, another vocabulary list, another course, another app, another notebook. Preparing feels productive. Preparing feels safe. But there is something interesting about preparation. Preparation has no finish line. There is always another word to learn, another grammar rule to review, another video to watch, another lesson to complete. Without realizing it, many learners become experts at preparing, but beginners at communicating. The strange part is that communication was the goal from the very beginning. Somewhere along the way, the goal quietly changed. Instead of learning English to communicate, they began learning English to avoid mistakes. Those are two completely different journeys. One leads toward people. The other leads toward perfection. Only one of them creates fluency. Think back to your first language. Did you wait until every sentence was perfect before speaking? Of course not. You spoke with the words you had. You made mistakes, thousands of them. Nobody expected perfection. Nobody handed you a grammar book before your first conversation. You learned because you participated, not because you performed perfectly. That simple truth never changes. Not for children, not for adults, not for any language. Real communication has never required perfect English. It has only required enough English to share an idea. Sometimes that idea is very small. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I need some help. I don't understand. Those simple sentences have connected people for generations. They aren't impressive. They aren't complicated. But they work. Language was never designed to impress people. It was designed to help people understand one another. The moment we forget that, English begins to feel much heavier than it really is. A single sentence starts carrying impossible expectations. It must be correct. It must sound natural. It must be fluent. It must be confident. It must be perfect. That's a lot of pressure for one simple sentence. Imagine asking a musician to perform perfectly every time they touch a piano. Imagine asking an athlete to win every race. Imagine asking a child never to fall while learning to walk. It would be impossible. Yet many people ask exactly that of themselves every time they speak English. No wonder speaking feels exhausting. Perfection demands certainty. Conversation does not. Conversation only asks you to continue, to listen, to respond, to try again, to stay present. The most meaningful conversations are rarely perfect. Sometimes people pause. Sometimes they search for words. Sometimes they laugh because they misunderstood each other. Sometimes they explain the same idea twice. That isn't failure, that's communication. Native speakers do it every day. They forget words. They interrupt themselves. They change their minds in the middle of a sentence. They ask people to repeat something. They misunderstand jokes. They correct themselves. The difference isn't that native speakers make fewer mistakes. The difference is that they don't stop the conversation because of them. They keep moving forward. That's an important habit, because conversations always move forward. They don't wait for perfect grammar. They don't stop while someone searches for the ideal vocabulary word. Life keeps moving, and fluent speakers learn to move with it. Perhaps that's what fluency really is. Not speaking without mistakes, not speaking without hesitation, but continuing despite both. There is something deeply comforting about that idea. It means you don't need to become someone else. You don't need a different personality. You don't need a perfect memory. You don't need a special talent. You only need to become a little more comfortable with being imperfect. That is where confidence quietly begins. Not after perfection. Long before it. Long before anyone notices. Long before you notice it yourself. Every conversation becomes a small piece of evidence. I spoke. I was understood. I survived. Then another conversation adds another piece. Then another. Slowly, your brain begins collecting a different story. Perhaps speaking English isn't dangerous after all. Perhaps mistakes aren't disasters. Perhaps silence isn't something to fear. Perhaps communication has never been about being perfect. Perhaps it has always been about being willing. And willingness changes everything. Because the moment you become willing to speak with the English you already have, you stop waiting for the future. You begin using the present. That's where every fluent speaker once started. Not with perfect English, with enough courage to begin. The rest came later. Your brain is protecting you. There is something fascinating about the human brain. It has one important job: to keep you alive. Every second of every day, your brain is asking quiet questions. Is this safe? Should I pay attention? Do I need to react? Most of the time, you never notice these questions. The answers happen automatically. When you touch a hot pan, you pull your hand away. When you hear a loud noise behind you, you turn around. When someone suddenly calls your name, your attention shifts without effort. Your brain was designed to notice uncertainty long before it notices comfort. That instinct helped humans survive for thousands of years. Without it, our ancestors would have ignored danger. They would have missed warning signs. They would have made careless decisions. So your brain became very good at protecting you. The interesting part is this: your brain cannot always tell the difference between physical danger and social discomfort. Standing in front of a hungry lion is dangerous. Speaking English in front of strangers is not. Yet your brain sometimes reacts in surprisingly similar ways. Your heart beats faster. Your breathing changes. Your thoughts become louder. Your body becomes more alert. Nothing dangerous is actually happening. But your brain doesn't know that yet. It only knows that something feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar situations always receive extra attention. Think about the first day at a new school, or your first day at a new job. Perhaps you remember feeling nervous, not because the building was dangerous, because everything was new. New faces, new voices, new expectations. After a few weeks, those same hallways felt ordinary. Nothing about the building changed. You changed. Your brain stopped treating the place as unfamiliar. Speaking English follows the same pattern. The first conversations often feel uncomfortable, not because you're incapable, because your brain hasn't learned that the situation is safe. Safety cannot be learned from a textbook. It must be experienced. One conversation, then another, then another. Each successful experience sends a quiet message back to your brain. We're okay. No one laughed. The conversation continued. We understood each other. At first, those messages seem small, almost invisible. But your brain remembers them. Slowly, it begins changing its expectations. Instead of expecting embarrassment, it starts expecting communication. That change is powerful because expectations shape behavior. Imagine two people walking into the same room. The first person expects everyone to judge them. The second person expects everyone to be friendly. The room hasn't changed. Only the expectation has. And that expectation changes how each person smiles, how they speak, how they listen, how they respond. Language learning works in exactly the same way. Many learners enter every conversation expecting problems. What if I forget a word? What if my grammar is wrong? What if my pronunciation sounds strange? Those questions quietly guide their attention. Soon, they begin noticing every mistake, every hesitation, every small imperfection. Their confidence becomes smaller, even while their English becomes better. Now imagine asking different questions. What interesting conversation might happen today? What new expression might I hear? What can I learn from this person? Notice how different those questions feel. They move your attention away from fear toward curiosity. Curiosity is one of the most powerful learning tools your brain has. When you're curious, you stop trying to protect yourself from every mistake. You become interested in discovering something new. Children understand this naturally. They ask questions all day. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why is the grass green? They don't worry about asking the perfect question. Their curiosity is stronger than their fear. Adults often lose that balance. Fear becomes louder. Curiosity becomes quieter. Perhaps learning another language is partly about reversing that process. Not becoming more intelligent, becoming more curious. There is another reason your brain becomes quiet during conversations. It prefers familiar patterns. Imagine driving home after work. One day you arrive home and suddenly realize something. You barely remember the drive. You stopped thinking about every turn, every traffic light, every movement. Your brain recognized the pattern. It became automatic. Automatic behavior saves energy. Your brain loves that. Now think about speaking your first language. You don't build every sentence from the beginning. You don't stop to choose every verb. You don't carefully assemble every word. Patterns do most of the work. Thousands of conversations have already trained your brain. English is different. Most learners haven't repeated those patterns enough times, so the brain cannot use its shortcuts. It must think through every decision. That takes time and effort. The good news is that patterns can be learned. Every repeated phrase becomes easier. Every familiar expression becomes faster. Not because you're forcing yourself to memorize it, because your brain has finally seen it often enough. Imagine hearing the phrase, "How was your day?" The first time, your brain translates every word. After hearing it 50 times, something changes. It becomes one complete idea. No translation, no analysis, just understanding. That is how fluency grows. Not through individual words, through familiar patterns. Perhaps you've been trying to remember too many separate pieces, when your brain is actually searching for connections. Connections are easier to remember than isolated facts. Think about a favorite song. You don't remember one random lyric. You remember the melody, the rhythm. One line naturally leads to the next. Language works in a similar way. Words rarely appear alone. They travel together. Good morning. Nice to meet you. Take your time. See you tomorrow. Thank you very much. Little by little, your brain begins recognizing these groups as single units. Speaking becomes smoother. Listening becomes easier. Reading becomes faster. Not because English changed, because your brain did. Let's slow down for a moment. Read these sentences naturally. My brain is learning every day. Again, my brain is learning every day. Every conversation makes me stronger. Again, every conversation makes me stronger. I don't need to feel ready. I only need to begin. Again, I don't need to feel ready. I only need to begin. Take one slow breath. Notice how calm those sentences feel. Simple language has a quiet power. It removes pressure. It creates space. Space to think. Space to listen. Space to grow. Remember this. Your brain is not trying to stop you. It is trying to protect you. Once it learns that English is no longer something to fear, it slowly stops holding you back. And when that happens, something else begins to change. The way you learn new words. Not by memorizing longer lists, but by finally giving those words a place to live. That's where our journey goes next. The vocabulary illusion. Most people believe vocabulary is the answer. If they learn more words, they'll become better speakers. It sounds reasonable. In fact, it sounds so reasonable that millions of learners spend years doing exactly that. Every morning they memorize 10 new words. Every evening, they review yesterday's list. After a few months, they've collected hundreds of new words. After a few years, perhaps thousands. Then, something unexpected happens. A simple conversation still feels difficult. How is that possible? Where did all those words go? The truth is both surprising and reassuring. The words didn't disappear. They're still there. Your brain simply doesn't know when to use them. Knowing a word and using a word are two completely different abilities. Imagine walking into a kitchen you've never seen before. Inside there are beautiful shelves filled with ingredients. Fresh vegetables, rice, pasta, eggs, spices from around the world. Everything you need to prepare an excellent meal. Now imagine someone asks you to cook dinner. Would having more ingredients automatically make you a better cook? Probably not. Cooking is not about owning ingredients. It's about knowing how they work together. Language follows the same principle. Words are ingredients. Conversations are meals. Fluency comes from combining simple things well, not from collecting more things. Think about your own language. How many different words do you use in an ordinary day? Far fewer than you imagine. Most conversations repeat the same expressions. Good morning. How are you? That sounds great. I'm not sure. I'll call you later. What do you think? Really? That's interesting. Can you help me? See you tomorrow. Everyday communication is built on familiar patterns, not extraordinary vocabulary. That's one reason native speakers sound so natural. They aren't searching for impressive words. They're using familiar language with confidence. Many learners accidentally do the opposite. They search for difficult vocabulary because they believe difficult words sound more fluent. But fluency isn't measured by complexity. It's measured by ease. The easier your words come, the more natural your speech becomes. There's another reason vocabulary lists often disappoint people. Most words are learned without a home. Imagine someone gives you the word umbrella. You write it in a notebook. You memorize the definition. You pronounce it correctly. A week later, you remember it. A month later, you forget it. Now imagine a different experience. It's raining outside. You leave your house. Halfway down the street, you realize you've forgotten your umbrella. You run back home. You open the door. You grab it. The rain is falling harder now. The next time you hear the word umbrella, what happens? You don't remember a definition. You remember an experience. Your brain prefers experiences over explanations. That's why vocabulary connected to real life stays longer. The word becomes part of a memory, not just part of a lesson. The same thing happens with emotions. Think about the phrase, "I'm exhausted." Perhaps you learned it years ago, but the first time you said it after a very long day, the phrase became real. It wasn't simply English anymore. It described your life. And when language becomes personal, memory becomes stronger. Many learners ask, how many words do I need to become fluent? The question sounds important, but perhaps it's the wrong question. A better question might be, how deeply do I know the words I already have? There's a big difference between recognizing a word and owning it. You own a word when it appears naturally, without searching, without translating, without effort. That kind of vocabulary cannot be rushed. It grows through repetition, through listening, through reading, through speaking, most importantly, through living. Imagine learning the word hungry. You hear it once, then again. You read it in a story. You hear it in a movie. One afternoon you say, "I'm hungry," without planning to, without translating, without thinking. That is the moment the word becomes yours, not because you memorized it, because you used it. Language becomes stronger every time it enters your real life. There is something else worth noticing. Your brain remembers words in groups, not individually. Think about the phrase, "I don't know." You probably don't build it word by word anymore. It arrives as one complete idea. The same happens with "take your time." "I'll be right back." That makes sense. "How's it going?" These are called language patterns. Native speakers depend on them constantly. They don't invent every sentence from the beginning. Their brains recognize familiar combinations. That's one reason conversations feel effortless. The good news is that your brain learns patterns naturally. Every time you hear the same expression, the connection becomes stronger. Little by little, the pattern replaces translation. Then one day you hear, "Take your time." And before you even notice, you already understand it. No dictionary, no grammar, no analysis, just meaning. Let's pause for a moment. Read these sentences slowly. I don't need more words. I need more experience with the words I already know. Again, I don't need more words. I need more experience with the words I already know. Now continue. Every word becomes stronger when I use it. Again, every word becomes stronger when I use it. Simple language creates real conversations. Again, simple language creates real conversations. Take one slow breath. Notice how those sentences feel. They're simple, but they're honest. And honest language is memorable. Tomorrow, instead of learning 20 new words, try something different. Choose 5 words you already know. Use each one 3 times. Say them out loud. Write one sentence. Notice them while listening to a podcast. Look for them in an article. By the end of the day, those 5 words will feel more familiar than 20 words you've never used. Small circles become strong circles. Strong circles become habits, and habits become fluency. The goal has never been to know the most words. The goal is to make your words available exactly when you need them. Because in real conversations, speed doesn't come from memory alone. It comes from familiarity, from trust, from repetition, from living with the language instead of simply studying it. And once your vocabulary begins living inside your everyday life, something unexpected happens. Listening becomes easier. Not because people start speaking more slowly, but because your brain finally recognizes what it has been quietly collecting all along. The listening revolution. There is a reason children spend so much time listening before they begin speaking. Not because they are studying, not because someone tells them to, because listening comes first. Long before a child says, "Mom," or "Dad," their brain has already heard those words thousands of times. Every voice, every conversation, every bedtime story, every laugh, every question. Without realizing it, their brain is collecting patterns, quietly, patiently, day after day. By the time the first word is spoken, the learning has already begun. The speaking is simply the part we notice. Listening did most of the work. Many adult learners accidentally reverse this process. They spend most of their time trying to speak, very little time learning how English actually sounds. Imagine learning to play the piano. Before touching the keys, you spend months listening to beautiful music. At first, it all sounds complicated. Then something changes. You begin noticing familiar melodies. You recognize the rhythm. You start expecting certain notes. Your ears begin learning before your hands ever move. Language follows the same path. Your ears teach your mouth, not the other way around. One of the biggest misunderstandings about listening is the belief that you must understand everything. That expectation creates unnecessary pressure. Imagine watching the ocean. Do you count every wave? Of course not. You simply experience it. Listening works in much the same way. You don't need every word. You need the message. Think about your favorite movie. The first time you watched it, you probably noticed the main story. The second time, you noticed details you had missed. The third time, you recognized small expressions. The movie never changed. Your attention did. English listening develops in exactly the same way. Every time you hear familiar voices, your brain notices something new. Not because people are speaking differently, because your brain is becoming better at finding patterns. There's something remarkable about repeated listening. The first time, you may understand only half of what you hear. That can feel discouraging. But listen again a few days later, without studying, without memorizing, without forcing yourself. Suddenly, another sentence becomes clear, then another. Your brain continued working after the audio stopped. Learning doesn't end when the lesson ends. Your brain keeps organizing information long after you've moved on. Scientists sometimes describe learning as a process of strengthening connections. Imagine walking through a grassy field. The first path is difficult. The grass is tall. Every step requires effort. Walk the same path every day. Soon, the grass begins to bend. The ground becomes easier to follow. After enough time, there is a clear trail. Your brain builds language in a similar way. Every familiar sentence strengthens a pathway. Every repeated expression makes the trail easier to find. That's why listening to one podcast 10 times is often more valuable than listening to 10 different podcasts once. Depth creates stronger memories than constant novelty. Modern life encourages us to move quickly. New videos, new lessons, new courses, new teachers. There's nothing wrong with variety, but your brain also needs familiarity. It needs to meet the same words again, the same voice, the same rhythm, the same expressions. That's how confidence grows, not through endless new information, through recognizing what was once unfamiliar. Have you ever noticed how comforting a familiar voice can be? Perhaps it's a close friend, a family member, or someone whose podcast you listen to every week. After a while, their voice feels predictable. You know their rhythm. You recognize the way they pause. You understand their expressions before they finish the sentence. That comfort matters, because familiarity reduces mental effort. The less energy your brain spends adjusting to the speaker, the more energy it can spend understanding the message. That's one reason many successful learners listen to the same speakers repeatedly. Not because they're avoiding new English, because they're building strong foundations. Listening is also teaching you something invisible: pronunciation. Not individual sounds, patterns. Notice how native speakers connect words together. Sometimes words seem to disappear. Sometimes they become shorter. Sometimes two words sound like one. At first, this feels confusing. Then one day, it feels normal. Your ears slowly learn the music of English. And language is much closer to music than many people realize. You don't enjoy a song because you understand every sound. You enjoy the rhythm, the feeling, the flow. English has its own rhythm too. The more you hear it, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, your own speaking begins changing. Not because someone corrected every sentence, because your ears quietly became better teachers. Let's slow down for a moment. Read these sentences with me. I don't need to understand every word. I only need to keep listening. Again, I don't need to understand every word. I only need to keep listening. Now continue. Every time I listen, my brain finds new patterns. Again, every time I listen, my brain finds new patterns. Listening makes speaking easier. Again, listening makes speaking easier. Take a slow breath. Notice how those words feel. Simple, calm, clear. Sometimes the greatest progress happens when nothing seems to be happening. You're listening while cooking, listening while walking, listening while driving, listening before bed. It doesn't feel like studying, yet your brain is quietly building thousands of tiny connections. Each one is small, almost invisible, but together they become something powerful. One day, someone asks you a question. This time, the answer arrives a little faster, not because you studied harder yesterday, because your brain has heard similar patterns hundreds of times before. That's the quiet power of listening. It rarely feels dramatic. It rarely feels exciting. But it changes everything beneath the surface. And once listening becomes part of your daily life, another transformation begins. You stop translating every sentence. You begin understanding ideas. Instead of hearing individual words, you hear meaning. And that may be one of the most important changes in the entire journey. Why translation is slowing you down. For many learners, translation feels natural. It feels helpful. It feels necessary. When you hear an English sentence, your brain quietly turns it into your native language. Only then does it understand the meaning. At first, this is completely normal. Translation is a bridge. Every learner needs that bridge in the beginning. The problem begins when the bridge becomes a permanent home. Imagine visiting a beautiful island. Every day you cross the same bridge. After many years, you still refuse to step onto the island. Instead, you stand in the middle of the bridge looking in both directions. That would be a strange way to live. Yet many English learners spend years doing exactly that. Every sentence makes two journeys: English to their native language and back to English again. The conversation keeps moving. Their thoughts stay behind. That extra step may only take a second, but conversations are built from seconds. 1 second becomes 2. 2 become 5. Soon, the discussion has already moved somewhere else. The learner isn't slow. The process is. Your brain doesn't think in dictionaries. Think about the word coffee. When you hear it, what happens first? Do you see the dictionary definition? Probably not. You might imagine the smell, a warm cup, steam rising into the air, the first sip in the morning, your favorite cafe. Your brain doesn't naturally think in words. It thinks in experiences, pictures, sounds, feelings, memories. Language simply gives those experiences a name. That's why children learn so naturally. When they hear apple, they don't translate it. Someone shows them an apple. They touch it. They taste it. They smell it. The word becomes connected directly to reality. No bridge is needed. Adults often build an unnecessary bridge because translation feels familiar, but familiarity is not always efficiency. Meaning comes before words. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a quiet beach. The sky is bright blue. Small waves reach the shore. The air feels warm. You hear seagulls in the distance. Notice what happened. You didn't create those images with your native language. You created them with imagination. Meaning arrived first. Words arrived second. That is how the human mind works. Language doesn't create ideas. Ideas create language. The more directly English connects to your ideas, the less translation your brain needs, and the lighter every conversation becomes. The slowest habit. Translation doesn't only slow your speaking, it slows your listening too. Imagine someone says, "I'll be there in a minute." Before you finish translating, they've already spoken the next sentence. Now you're trying to understand two sentences at once. The pressure grows. The conversation feels fast. But perhaps the speaker isn't speaking too quickly. Perhaps your brain is carrying extra work. Every translated sentence is another task, another decision, another delay. Remove enough delays, and conversations begin feeling surprisingly comfortable. Learning to see, not translate. Imagine looking out of your window. You notice a tree. You don't need to think, tree means, you simply see the tree. Now look at the sky. Blue, clouds, sunlight. Again, there is no need to translate. You already understand the scene. English can become part of that experience. The sky is blue. The tree is tall. The wind feels cool. Those sentences don't describe vocabulary. They describe reality. Reality is easier to remember than isolated words. That's why everyday observation is one of the most powerful language exercises. The world quietly becomes your teacher. Read with me. Let's slow down together. Read naturally. Meaning comes first. Words come second. Again, meaning comes first. Words come second. Now continue. I don't translate every sentence. I understand the idea. Again, I don't translate every sentence. I understand the idea. English connects directly to my thoughts. Again, English connects directly to my thoughts. Take a slow breath. There is no need to rush. Your brain is already learning. A different kind of practice. Tomorrow, try something small. Choose one ordinary activity: making tea, washing dishes, walking to the store. Don't translate your thoughts. Simply describe what is happening. The water is warm. The cup is empty. I'm opening the door. The street is quiet. The air feels fresh. Keep your sentences simple. If you don't know a word, don't stop. Describe the idea another way. Real conversations work exactly like that. People don't stop speaking every time they forget one word. They explain. They point. They smile. They continue. Communication always finds a way. The freedom of simplicity. Many learners believe translation helps them understand. Sometimes it does. But fluency begins the moment understanding no longer depends on translation. Not because your native language disappears. It never will. Because English slowly builds its own place inside your mind, a place where ideas become English naturally, without effort, without permission, without asking your first language to help every time. That transformation happens quietly, almost invisibly. One sentence today, another tomorrow, another next week. Little by little, the bridge becomes shorter. The journey becomes easier. Then one ordinary afternoon, someone asks you a question. You answer immediately. Only afterward do you notice something remarkable. You never translated the question. You simply understood it. That small moment may last only a few seconds, but it marks the beginning of a completely different relationship with English. And once English begins connecting directly to your thoughts, something extraordinary starts to happen. You stop trying to think about English. You begin thinking in English. Thinking in English. Most people believe thinking in English is something that happens at the end of the journey. As if one morning, after years of studying, your brain suddenly changes. It doesn't happen that way. Thinking in English doesn't begin with complicated ideas. It begins with ordinary moments. A glass of water, a quiet street, a warm cup of coffee, a bird sitting on a tree. These moments don't require advanced vocabulary. They only require attention. And attention is where every language begins. Your first language doesn't disappear. Some learners worry about one strange question. If I start thinking in English, will I stop thinking in my own language? The answer is no. Your first language isn't replaced. It becomes a trusted companion. Learning another language doesn't erase the first one. It simply gives your mind another way to understand the world. Think about someone who plays the piano and the guitar. Learning one instrument doesn't make them forget the other. It simply gives them another way to create music. Languages work the same way. Your brain is capable of holding more than one system. It doesn't choose between them. It learns when to use each one. Small thoughts become big changes. There is no need to think about philosophy, politics, business, or science. Not yet. Begin with the life you already live. You're making breakfast. Think, the eggs are almost ready. You're walking outside. Think, it's cooler today. You're looking for your keys. Think, where did I put them? The sentences are short, but something important is happening. English is no longer living inside a lesson. It is beginning to live inside your day. That's where real fluency starts. Not during study time, during life. Your brain loves familiar places. Have you ever noticed that certain places bring back old memories? A familiar song, the smell of fresh bread, a street you haven't visited in years. Suddenly, memories return without effort. The brain connects places with experiences. You can use that same ability while learning English. Perhaps every morning you describe your breakfast in English. Every evening you describe the sunset. Every time you drive, you notice the weather. Soon, those places begin reminding your brain to think in English, without forcing it, without setting a timer. Your environment quietly becomes part of your learning. Stop translating your life. Many learners wait for special practice sessions, 1 hour after work, a lesson every weekend, a podcast before bed. Those habits are valuable, but English becomes much stronger when it quietly enters your ordinary routine. Instead of translating your thoughts, replace them. Not all of them, just one, then another, then another. The process feels surprisingly small, yet small changes repeated every day become powerful habits. One sentence while making coffee, one sentence while opening the window, one sentence while waiting for the elevator. The day already contains hundreds of opportunities. You simply begin noticing them. Read with me. Let's slow down again. Read naturally. English is becoming part of my day. Again, English is becoming part of my day. I don't need perfect thoughts. I need honest thoughts. Again, I don't need perfect thoughts. I need honest thoughts. Every small sentence builds confidence. Again, every small sentence builds confidence. Excellent. Keep reading calmly. There is no finish line, only another step forward. Pictures speak faster than words. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a quiet mountain lake. The water is perfectly still. The air feels cool. The sky reflects on the surface. Notice what appeared first. Not words, pictures. The human mind naturally thinks through images. Language simply describes those images. This is one reason translation becomes slower over time. Fluent speakers don't usually translate. They see an idea. Then the words arrive naturally. You can begin practicing the same skill today. Look at a tree. Don't think of the translation. Simply notice it. Green leaves, tall branches, soft wind. Then describe what you see. One simple sentence is enough. The picture comes first. The English follows. Thinking is a habit. Habits rarely begin with big decisions. They begin with repetition. Imagine tying your shoes. You no longer think about every movement. Imagine brushing your teeth. You don't need instructions. Imagine locking your front door. The action feels automatic. Thinking in English develops the same way. At first, every sentence requires effort. Later, the effort becomes smaller. Eventually, you notice something unexpected. An English sentence appears before your native language does. Only for a second. Then for several seconds. Then for an entire conversation. Nothing magical happened. Your brain simply built a new habit. The quiet transformation. One day, someone asks, "How was your weekend?" You answer. The conversation continues. You smile. Only later do you realize something. You never planned your answer. You never translated it. The words simply arrived. That moment often surprises learners, not because it's extraordinary, because it feels ordinary, natural, almost effortless. The change didn't happen during one lesson. It happened through hundreds of quiet moments that seemed too small to matter. Thinking while walking, thinking while cooking, thinking while watching the rain, thinking while waiting in line. Tiny moments. Repeated often enough, they become a different way of living. Before we continue, thinking in English is not the destination. It is the result. It grows naturally when listening becomes familiar, when vocabulary becomes personal, when translation becomes unnecessary, when speaking stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like life. The surprising part is this. Once English becomes part of your everyday thinking, studying begins to feel different. You stop chasing fluency, because without realizing it, you're already building it. The next step isn't learning more, it's learning to trust what you've already built. The habit that changes everything. There is a question that almost everyone asks. How can I stay motivated? It sounds like the right question, but perhaps it isn't. Motivation is unpredictable. Some mornings you wake up feeling excited. Everything seems possible. You open your notebook. You listen carefully. You practice speaking. Learning feels enjoyable. Then another day arrives. You're tired. Work was stressful. Your schedule is full. The last thing you want to do is study English. If your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always rise and fall. Some weeks you'll learn a great deal. Other weeks you'll learn almost nothing. The problem isn't your motivation. The problem is asking motivation to do a habit's job. The quiet power of routine. Think about brushing your teeth. Most mornings you don't stop and ask yourself, do I feel motivated today? You simply do it. The decision was made a long time ago. The habit now makes the decision for you. Imagine if learning English felt the same way. Not something you negotiate with yourself every day, just another part of your routine. As ordinary as making your bed, as familiar as drinking water, as natural as putting on your shoes before leaving the house. That's the kind of habit that changes people. Not because it's exciting, because it continues even when life becomes busy. 5 minutes can change a year. Many learners believe they need long study sessions, an hour, maybe 2. When they can't find enough time, they decide to wait until tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. A year passes surprisingly quickly. Now, imagine another person. They study for only 5 minutes every day. Some mornings before breakfast, some evenings before bed. 5 minutes doesn't seem impressive. It doesn't feel like enough. Yet something remarkable begins to happen. 5 minutes become 35 minutes every week, more than 2 hours every month, more than 30 hours every year. And perhaps more importantly, their brain never loses contact with English. The connection stays alive. One short conversation with the language, every single day. Tiny habits build strong minds. A large tree doesn't grow overnight. Neither does confidence. Neither does fluency. Growth happens quietly, root by root, leaf by leaf, day by day. People often notice the tree years later. They admire its strength, its height, its beauty. Very few people think about the thousands of ordinary days that made it possible. Language grows in exactly the same way. One page, one podcast, one sentence, one conversation. Nothing feels dramatic until one day, everything feels different. Read with me. Let's slow down again. Read these sentences naturally. Small habits create big changes. Again, small habits create big changes. I don't need to do everything today. I only need to keep going. Again, I don't need to do everything today. I only need to keep going. Every small step matters. Again, every small step matters. Take one slow breath. Notice how peaceful progress can feel. Your future is built quietly. Imagine meeting two English learners. The first studies for 6 hours on Saturday, then does nothing for the rest of the week. The second studies for 15 minutes every day. Neither schedule looks perfect, but one creates something valuable: consistency. The brain loves familiarity. It prefers seeing the language often, even for short periods. Every return strengthens the pathway. Every break weakens it just a little. Language isn't only about intensity, it's about frequency. The more often English becomes part of your day, the more natural it begins to feel. The habit loop. Every habit follows a simple pattern. Something reminds you. You take a small action. Your brain receives a reward. The pattern repeats. Imagine pouring your morning coffee. Instead of reaching for your phone, you play 5 minutes of English. The coffee becomes the reminder. Listening becomes the habit. The feeling of progress becomes the reward. Tomorrow, the coffee reminds you again. Soon, you no longer need motivation. The routine remembers for you. That's the quiet beauty of habits. They reduce the number of decisions you need to make, and every decision you no longer have to make saves energy for something more important, like learning. Progress is often invisible. There is something frustrating about learning a language. Progress is difficult to see. Imagine watching the hands of a clock. For a few seconds, they seem completely still. You might even think they aren't moving. Come back an hour later, everything has changed. Growth often works like that. It happens so gradually that it becomes invisible. Then one afternoon, you understand a sentence that once seemed impossible. You answer a question without translating. You finish a short conversation without panic. Those moments don't appear from nowhere. They were built during all the ordinary days you almost forgot. Every podcast, every page, every simple sentence, they were quietly preparing you. One promise. Before today ends, make one promise to yourself. Not a promise to become fluent this year. Not a promise to study harder than everyone else. Make a smaller promise, one you know you can keep. Perhaps it's listening for 10 minutes every morning. Perhaps it's reading one page before bed. Perhaps it's describing your breakfast in English. Choose something so simple that you have almost no excuse to skip it. Simple habits survive. Complicated plans rarely do. Looking ahead. The journey doesn't become easier because life becomes less busy. It becomes easier because English slowly becomes part of your life instead of competing with it. The goal has never been to find more time. The goal is to gently place English inside the time you already have. A few minutes while making breakfast. A few minutes during a walk. A few minutes before falling asleep. Those ordinary moments have been waiting for you all along. And when those moments become habits, something else begins to grow. Not your vocabulary, not your grammar. Something far more valuable. Your confidence. Confidence is collected. People often ask the wrong question. How can I become more confident? It sounds like confidence is something you find, as if it's waiting somewhere, hidden behind the next grammar lesson, or the next vocabulary list, or the next course. But confidence doesn't work that way. Confidence isn't discovered, it's collected. One experience at a time, one conversation at a time, one small success at a time. Imagine filling a glass with water. One drop doesn't seem important. Neither does the second or the third. but keep adding drops, and eventually the glass becomes full. Confidence grows in exactly the same way. One drop is a conversation that went better than expected. Another is understanding a sentence without translating. Another is answering a question without panic. None of those moments seem extraordinary. Together, they quietly change the way you see yourself. The evidence your brain needs. Your brain doesn't believe promises. It believes evidence. You can stand in front of a mirror every morning and say, "I can speak English." Those words may feel encouraging, but your brain asks a different question. Have you actually done it? Every real conversation answers that question. Every sentence becomes another piece of evidence. I spoke. They understood me. The conversation continued. I'm still here. Your brain remembers those moments. Not perfectly, not all at once, but little by little, they become part of your identity. That's why action changes confidence faster than positive thinking alone. Thoughts are important. Experience is unforgettable. The fear never completely disappears. Many people believe fluent speakers never feel nervous. The truth is much more comforting. Everyone feels nervous sometimes, even experienced speakers, even teachers, even people who have spoken English for decades. The difference isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to continue anyway. Imagine standing on a stage. Your heart beats faster, your hands feel cold. You take a deep breath. Then you begin. After a few minutes, something changes. The fear becomes quieter. Your attention shifts toward the audience. The conversation begins. English often feels exactly the same. The first sentence is usually the hardest. The second feels easier. The third arrives more naturally. Momentum replaces hesitation. That's why beginning is often the most important part. Stop measuring yourself. There is another habit that quietly steals confidence. Comparison. Someone speaks faster. Someone has a better accent. Someone knows more vocabulary. Someone started learning earlier. Comparison seems harmless, but it changes where your attention goes. Instead of noticing your own progress, you begin measuring someone else's journey. Imagine climbing a mountain. Every few minutes, you stop walking just to look at another climber. You notice they're higher than you. You become discouraged. What you forget is this. They started from a different place. They've been climbing for a different amount of time. They've taken a different path. Your only job is to keep walking. The mountain doesn't care how fast you climb. It only asks whether you continue. Read with me. Let's slow down. Read each sentence with confidence. Confidence grows through action. Again, confidence grows through action. Every conversation teaches me something valuable. Again, every conversation teaches me something valuable. I trust my progress. Again, I trust my progress. Excellent. Notice how calm your voice sounds. Calm voices build calm minds. The first 30 seconds. Think about the beginning of every conversation. Those first few moments often decide everything. If you spend them worrying, your mind becomes crowded. If you spend them listening, everything feels lighter. The next time someone speaks to you in English, don't focus on your answer immediately. Focus on understanding. Listen carefully. Smile naturally. Let the other person finish. You don't have to prepare your response while they're still talking. Good conversations are built by good listeners. Speaking begins with listening, not the other way around. Your English doesn't need permission. Some learners wait for permission. Permission to speak, permission to make mistakes, permission to sound imperfect. But no one can give you that permission because it already belongs to you. You don't earn the right to speak English after learning 10,000 words. You earn it the moment you decide to participate. Every beginner has the right to begin. Every learner has the right to improve. Every speaker has the right to pause. Those aren't rewards, they're part of learning. The more quickly you accept that, the more quickly English begins to feel like your own language instead of someone else's. 1 year from today. Imagine yourself exactly 1 year from now. Not perfect, Not flawless, just different. You walk into a coffee shop. You order without rehearsing. You ask a simple question. You understand the answer. You smile. The conversation lasts less than a minute. Most people around you won't remember it, but you will. Because you'll remember who you used to be. You'll remember the version of yourself who believed speaking English was impossible. And you'll realize something. The biggest change wasn't your vocabulary, or your grammar, or your pronunciation. The biggest change was your willingness to begin before you felt ready. The quiet confidence. Real confidence is surprisingly quiet. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't speak the loudest. It doesn't rush. It isn't afraid of short pauses. It doesn't panic after a mistake. It simply continues. Perhaps that's what Fluency has been teaching you all along. Not only how to speak another language, but how to become comfortable with uncertainty. How to stay calm when things aren't perfect. How to trust yourself one sentence at a time. Those lessons reach far beyond English. They quietly follow you into every part of life. And once confidence becomes part of who you are, you stop asking, "Can I speak English?" You begin asking a much better question. What meaningful conversation can I have today? The English you already have. Take a moment. Don't think about the words you don't know. Don't think about the grammar you've forgotten. Don't think about the conversations that didn't go well. Instead, think about everything you already understand. You understand simple greetings. You understand common questions. You understand familiar expressions. You understand songs you've heard many times. You understand short videos. You understand signs in airports. You understand menus. You understand more than you did last year, perhaps much more. The problem is that progress often becomes invisible to the person making it. The invisible backpack. Imagine carrying a backpack every day. Each morning, someone quietly places one small stone inside. The first stone feels weightless. The second does too. After a week, you don't notice the difference. After a month, the backpack is heavier. After a year, it contains hundreds of stones. Learning English works differently. Every conversation removes a stone instead of adding one. One fear disappears, then another. One hesitation becomes smaller, then another. You don't always notice the difference, until one day you realize the backpack feels lighter. The English didn't suddenly become easier. You became stronger. Stop looking for proof. Many learners ask, "How do I know if I'm improving?" The answer is rarely found in a test score. Sometimes it's much quieter. You understand a joke. You finish watching a short video without subtitles. You recognize an expression you've heard before. You answer a question before translating it. You remember a word you thought you'd forgotten. These moments don't usually feel dramatic. They're easy to ignore. Yet they are some of the strongest signs of progress. Growth often whispers. It rarely announces itself. Your brain is building a new home. Earlier, we talked about translation. Now imagine something different. Imagine your first language as the house where you grew up. Every room feels familiar. You know exactly where everything is. English is like building another home. At first, it's only a foundation. Then a few walls appear. A roof, a window, a door. Little by little, it becomes a place you recognize. One day, you walk inside without thinking. You don't stop to admire the walls. You simply live there. That's what thinking in English feels like. Not visiting, living. Read with me. Let's slow down one last time. Read each sentence naturally. I already know more English than I realize. Again. I already know more English than I realize. My English grows every single day. Again. My English grows every single day. I trust myself. Again. I trust myself. Take a slow breath. Those words matter. Not because they're difficult, because they're true. A conversation you'll never forget. Perhaps it will happen when you least expect it. You're traveling, or working, or standing in line for a coffee. Someone starts talking to you in English. Without thinking, you answer. The conversation continues. You laugh together. You ask another question. A few minutes later, you walk away. Then something wonderful happens. You stop walking. You smile. Not because the conversation was perfect, because you suddenly realize you never stopped to think about grammar. You never searched for every word. You simply communicated. That moment cannot be measured by a certificate. It cannot be measured by a test, but you'll remember it for years, because it marks the day English stopped feeling like a subject and started feeling like part of your life. Looking back, think about where you began. Perhaps English once felt impossible. Every sentence seemed confusing. Every conversation felt frightening. Every mistake felt enormous. Now compare that version of yourself with the person listening today. You have changed. Maybe not as quickly as you hoped, but much more than you realize. Growth is often hidden from the person experiencing it. That's why looking back is so important. It reminds you how far you've already come. The journey never really ends. There is one final truth worth remembering. Fluency is not a finish line. It isn't a certificate. It isn't a score. It isn't the day you stop making mistakes. Fluency is the day English becomes a normal part of your life. The day you stop counting vocabulary words. The day you stop worrying about perfect grammar. The day you begin focusing on people instead of sentences. Because language has never been about perfection. It has always been about connection. Connection with ideas. Connection with stories. Connection with places. And most importantly, connection with other people.
As this conversation comes to an end, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. You don't need to become a different person to speak English. You don't need a perfect memory. You don't need a special talent. You don't need to know every word in the dictionary. You only need to keep showing up. One conversation, one page, one podcast, one ordinary day at a time. Some days will feel easy. Others won't. Keep going anyway. Some conversations will feel natural. Others may feel uncomfortable. Keep speaking anyway. Some days you'll notice progress. Other days you'll wonder if anything is changing. Trust the process anyway, because the greatest changes in life are usually quiet. A tree doesn't grow overnight. The sunrise doesn't happen all at once. The ocean shapes the shore one wave at a time. Language grows in the same way, patiently, gently, almost invisibly, until one ordinary day, someone asks you a simple question. You smile. You answer. The conversation flows naturally. And only afterward do you realize something. The person who was once afraid to speak is no longer there. Not because they disappeared, because they kept moving forward. One sentence at a time. One conversation at a time. One ordinary day at a time. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope today's journey reminds you that fluency is not something you chase. It's something you quietly build. Take care of yourself. Keep listening. Keep reading. Keep speaking. And most importantly, keep believing that every small step matters. I'll see you in the next episode.